Oh my God! That's just too dirty!
Yeah. The shit's fire.
This is a fucking banger.
Ladies and gentlemen, cats, snakes, dogs, chicken, elderly people, workers and twerkers.
Yeah.
Turn it up!
I don't give a fuck. It's the Ruckus. What the fuck you expect?
I body slapped my wife, my nigga.
He was able to get the album, and when he got the album, he like, yo, I want to get on this track. But you know who they wanted before on the track?
Who?
Nas.
Oh.
They wanted not. There was a track. What's it? This. They was in the second album. This song called "The Pizza Shop." I don't know if you heard that song in the second album.
No.
You got into that song, Pizza Shop. Nas heard it. He's like, yo, I want to get in on this. So they're like, all right, whatever. So Jay heard the album. He's like, yo, I want to get on this joint. So they were like, all right. So mind you, like they got these two artists and they beefing with each other. And Jay is like scorching. Like Jay is like damn near getting like 100,000 for like a track. And he was like, I would love you to have on the album, but we can't afford you. And he like, we'll talk about that later. So they were like, all right, it would be great to have both of them on the album for different songs. But it got to the point, whoever gets whoever gets the track first and like, you know, split a 16, that's the one we're taking. And fucking Nas took forever. And
okay, that's an interesting story. That's dope.
Yeah, and Jay ended up doing the Hell Yeah remix. And they were like, yo, it was bugged out because we in Baseline Studio. He called us up. We in the studio, so he tells somebody it's Dead Prez, Jay-Z, and Beyonce. And they're like very awkward because you got like a hip hopper, a pop star, and like these fucking anti-record label people.
Yeah. That seems like a really weird combination of people to have in this.
Weird combination. So it was like, yo, we saw like that fucking Jay-Z aura. Like we gave him the beat that he wanted, and he literally did that fucking I'm no pattern, no pen shit, did his shit like in 10 minutes, and it was done. And they were like, okay, so the track was done. They loved it, and they were like, yo, they were talking like the budget. He's like, all right, how we gonna do the budget thing? And he's like, just talk to our lawyers and we'll figure it out. So they went to the lawyer, and they're like, nah, we ain't charging y'all. This is like on the house.
Oh, for real?
They gave him that free verse, and he was like, yo, because the thing about like, you gotta listen to this. I don't know if you ever heard of the One MC podcast.
No. Put me on to that.
You got into that podcast. Like that was the first podcast Jay ever did. And it's like you don't get Jay-Z like you know, hip like pop star Jay-Z. Like you get nerd out hip hop Jay-Z. Like he talked about all the underground shit. He talked about how he's supposed to get beats for Dilla, but never got it in his hands. Like his battles with Big L. Like he got.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something about Jay-Z real quick. I've never. No, chill. Hold on a second. I'm gonna speak the truth on Jay-Z real quick. My thing with Jay-Z isn't necessarily I've never had a problem with him specifically. I've always actually respected everything he's done in the game. I've literally followed his career from his very first album. And to see where he was at to where he is today, that takes work. Nobody gave him that. He has talent. Like, yeah, I'm critical of some things, but to be where he was at, and still be relevant 20 years later and be where he's at socially, like he's a brand.
Yeah.
You still got to wake up every day at 5 o'clock in the fucking morning and go to bed at 1. And that's 7 days a week. So I've always given him credit. My issue isn't necessarily with Jay. It's with the type of music. I was never into that sort of like, bling hip hop type of shit, which he talked about.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, Mafioso rap. Yeah.
I was just never a fan. It just never. That's why going back to Dead Prez, I loved what Dead Prez was doing, and I actually remember having a conversation with my mom about Dead Prez, and because she saw the album cover, and I had explained to her what it was about, and my mom was just like, "What is this?" And you know, my dad, he's a black man, and he's conscious about being black. I explained it. He was like, "Yeah, that's it." Like my dad just gave me that, like, I get it. And my dad was never into hip hop because my dad also came from that generation of like, yo, they're all weed smokers and all this shit. But when I was explaining to him what Dead Prez was talking about, black liberation, black rights, all of this shit, he was like, yeah, that's what's up. So that's always been my issue with Jay-Z. It's never a talent thing. I know he's a titan in the game.
And that's a fair argument because you know what that when everybody say like the dislike about Jay, 90% of the answers will be the type that you gave. So that dispute is it's a good one. It's a real good one. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
no, I
saying?
don't. Listen, man, I hate on him. I know I hate on him in terms of like the joking fashion, but yo, you cannot take away because there's probably been other rappers in the history of hip hop that probably were better lyricists than him. That were probably better, verses, whatever. But not all of them were putting in the work that he put in to be where he's at today, bro. He's still relevant 20 years later. He outworked him, and I love that, and I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that.
And one more thing about the dead person, you gotta listen to the podcast, bro. They talked about like, they had like a crazy relationship with Nipsey Hussle. So,
for real?
Yes, they talked about like, we named Nipsey like because they said how it first started off, Nipsey DM'd them. So they were like, okay, we need to link up or whatever, and they met up in Miami. He met up with one of them in Miami, and then he met up with another in Cali, and he would just talk about how much of a fan he was of the first album. And it was like they were like a track. I forgot the name of the fucking song. You got to go back to the podcast. But it was like a track that he was like obsessed with for the first album. He like, I want to use that, and I want to have you on the remix, and do like a revolution version of that. Like my Nipsey spin with a combination of like gangster shit, but like also like on the revolution tip. Cause like y'all is it. Like he was just like a fan of those guys. And he like, he wanted to like do a remake of that.
Did they ever do that track? Is there like a hidden track somewhere? Dead Prez and Nipsey Hussle?
It was supposed to, but it never came out because he died.
Oh, fuck!
They were in talks.
I think that would have been phenomenal, man. Listen, let me just go through the track listing real quick of that album. So the album is Let's Get Free.
Let's Get Free.
It was released in 2000. On Loud Records, R.I.P. Loud Records. That was,
R.I.P.
And just a real quick interesting detail. So the record, it opens up with a speech by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, I think is. So it was the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and I think it was based out of Florida. So it was just like an African, Pan-African movement. And so the track listing, Wolves, which is, the knives. The wolf, he keeps licking the knife or whatever. I'm an African. They schools.
Yes.
Hip hop. Police state.
Yes.
Behind enemy lines.
Yep.
Assassination. Mind sex, which was probably one of those like just dope fucking.
That's a chick joint. Go figure.
Yeah, exactly.
And it worked.
It worked. We Want Freedom, Be Healthy, which was fucking great. I didn't know for a while that Prodigy was on that track, but yes, Prodigy was on that track with vocals. Discipline, Psychology, Happiness, Animal and Man, You'll Find a Way, and It's Bigger Than Hip Hop, Propaganda, and The Pistol. So those are the 18 tracks on Let's Get Free. And yeah, man, just fucking phenomenal. Phenomenal fucking album. Highly influential. I was always sad that they never got the commercial success that they needed.
They talked about that. Because they thought like their first album, like it was supposed to go off. Cause even the way they even came up with the song Hip Hop, that wasn't even supposed to be an album. Because the dude who made the beat hated it. He hated it.
Really? Get the fuck out of here.
Because I think M1 made the beat. One of those two made the beat because he was like known for being the producer. And it was like, this shit is like, because the thing about it, like just for shits and giggles, that whole like that.
Yeah. That grungy little sound in the back. Yeah.
What he was trying to do with that beat was like to imitate the humming when you got like those loud ass speakers in the car.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now it makes sense.
So he was trying to do that, but for some reason it just wasn't sounding right. So he was like, this shit is just fucking whack. And he left it alone. You know what I'm saying? He left it alone for like months and months and months. And then when they trying to turn on the album, like his home, I think Sticks came through the studio to like his house. So he was trying to see like all the leftover beats that he had. And that one came out, and like everybody like in the room was like feeling that beat. And he like, you like this bullshit? Like, this shit's gonna hit. This shit's gonna hit. And then they were like, trust me, this shit is going to hit. And he was like, I thank him for that, and I'm glad that I never became a personal A&R because that's our hit that we missed out on.
Listen, man, that beat is fuck. I remember Chappelle. That's one of the beats Chappelle had come out to during the Chappelle show. Yeah, and it was crazy because at that time,
The greatest
you had
skit comedy show ever.
that. No, listen, man. You put them together. That's really fucking interesting. You put them together. Chappelle and Dead Prez. They were tight. And then Dave would use that song when he would come out. Da-na-na-na-na.
Yeah.
Anyway, man, that was just an era. Like I said, I just think it would have been important for more of our people, to have access to Dead Prez. And they kept making music though. Let's not stop. They just never, So they had, after that, they had Revolutionary but Gangster.
Which is so slept on. That album was so fucking slept on, kid.
Very slept. RBG was fucking phenomenal. Then they had the series of mixtapes. So they had the Turn Off the Radio mixtapes, and then they had the mixtape number 2, which is Get Free or Die Trying, which I thought was phenomenal because it was based on 50 Cent's album Get Rich or Die Trying, and I thought that was ingenious of them to like parallel that and then so they had all these mixtapes, and they just kind of faded out for a while, which was, I always thought was sad, man. Because anyway, bro, it's
even the track they talked about, even the track that they were punted, how that came about. The track on Big Pun's album, you know how they were on Big Pun's album?
Yeah. So how did that come together?
They both said the same answer. They're like, I don't fucking know. And they started laughing. I don't know how that fuck came about. I remember we was in the studio. Pun came to our studio, and they wanted to see what they had for the album. And then he said there was something about the beat and the thunder and the raining and all this other shit. And he was like, yo, I want that. And he's like, they're like, no, you can't have that, Pun. He's like, no, I want that, like now.
Like, I'm not asking. I'm telling you, this is mine.
Now. And they're like, yo, they're like, Pun, you cannot thug your way out to this beat. It's ours for the album. And he's like, I'll be back. I'm gonna get you some cash. And I think he went to like his car or like the label office, and he came back with a big rack. I think it was like 10 G's or something like that. And he threw it. And I'm like, I want it. It's mine. And they're like, okay, take it.
That's fucking no. You know what? That's crazy that he got that. They got that type of respect because aren't they originally from Florida? They're from Florida, aren't they?
One's from Florida and the other one's from North Carolina, but they met in Florida because they were both going to school together.
Yeah, so these are two basically dudes from the South, still back in the early 2000s, getting all that respect from people up in the North. Because we still got to remember, early 2000s, you still had like that division in hip hop where New York was still holding it down.
Yes,
but things were slowly changing.
Yes, but you gotta remember it was Loud Records. So Loud Records, like the only one that was like they didn't care. They had everybody from either Chicago, California, Florida.
True.
They had 3 6 Mafia. They had Twister before Twister popped off, so they didn't care.
Wait, so 3 6 Mafia? 3 6 Mafia was on Loud Records? I don't remember that. Really?
Yes.
Oh,
their first
shit.
album. Their first album. Twister's first album. They were all on Loud Records. Steve had them early.
Fuck, I did not know that, man. I really did. But those are my blinders because at that stage I was still just like New York hip hop. Yeah. Ain't nothing out of New York, so all this country shit is whack. And then Juvenile, because we was talking about it earlier. Juvenile dropped Back That Ass Up, and then we were all like, it. I remember the summer that song dropped. It was like whatever, and then at the end of the summer, everybody was talking a little bit country. I was like, wait, the fuck?
Yeah. Yo, between them niggas and No Limit, they did a number on us.
Yeah, they did.
A number on us with their mouth.
Well, listen, man, the face of music today is because of what they did. Like this trap music, I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but that sound is just an extension of what these Southern boys.
Yep.
Like, what's from Houston, the DJ?
Chop and Screw.
DJ Screw.
DJ Screws.
Yeah, DJ Screw. Yeah, DJ Screw. All that like scissor that's slowing down, flip, all that shit that we're listening to now. Houston's been doing that forever. We just catching up onto it now. But the Southern boys, Cash Money, they opened up the doors. And I remember the end of the summer, man, everybody had a little twang in their fucking talk. Everybody had a friend in the South. Everybody had a cousin in the South. I was like, oh shit, man. But yeah, man, that shit was fucking crazy, bro. I'm like doing the nostalgia thing. Mike, let me ask you a question, bro. When you were a kid, like you obviously just like all of us, Cuban parents, Latino parents, what did your parents think of the fact that you were listening to hip hop? Were they okay with it? Did they understand? Like, did your parents speak English? Did the people in your house speak English?
We're all in the same department. Their English sucks just like everyone else's here. So they were here they were here years ago, and they still couldn't get it right. They didn't know how to flow with it. The funny thing with rap, we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with rap music and myself. Like with rap, it was in my house, but it left, and it kept coming back because when I was going back and forth with Jersey and New York, it was this thing because the thing about it, my mom had Puerto Rican friends. So the Puerto Rican, like they were more into the hip hop thing because of the break dancing, the freestyle, all that other shit, Lisa.
Yeah,
So
I remember that.
They got into to that Stevie. What's the nigga's name? The freestyle nigga Stevie Stevie B, was it Stevie B?
Stevie B.
Yeah. So that shit was tipped and that shit was large in the tri-state area. So I remember with Run DMC and the Fat Boy, like my mom loved the Fat Boy. Like we used to watch their movies and all that other shit. So it was like a thing. But then once we started hearing Spanish rap with the Cuban dude Melon Mayonnaise, it started slowly creeping up. But my mom, I got away with murder because a lot of my friends couldn't really listen to rap like that because they had a lot of, cussing and violence and fucked up skittles and things. But I got away with it because my mom like, all right, you can listen to this, but don't behave like this outside the house. If I find out you're acting like this, I'm kicking your ass. So we had an agreement. But if I could recollect like the time that I could say like my mom was finally getting hip hop was when the Fugees came out. And I copped the tape, and I remember the two songs that stood out was the Killing Me Softly and No Woman No Cry. Because when my mom was in Cuba, the original version of Killing Me Softly was popping back in the day, and Bob Marley was fucking Bob Marley. So once they heard that flip, they're like, "Oh, who's these dudes? This is kind of cool."
That's fucking dope. So your mom was basically, she wasn't supportive of the hip hop, but she was like, there was a certain part of her that was vibing with the music.
Yes. Because the thing about it, like now when you got the whole old school, like the new school taking the thing from the new school, whatever. Once they see where we get our influence from, you know what I mean? And they were like paying homage, and not only paying homage, they killed the new version, and then the older cats were able to appreciate it. Be like, okay, this is cool because like our parents, they don't understand bars, lyricism, metaphors, double word. They don't understand that thing. When their ears they hear fuck bitch, I'ma kill you, this, that, they niggas screaming loud, being mad aggressive. They don't get that. You know what I mean? So if you tiptoe them and give them like a happy beat with a happy sound and don't curse, or you flip whatever version of song they used to listen to back in the day and they kill it now, they're able to get it. So now, years later, after her, being such and such with the music, now she's a little bit. Now she's kind of like the cool one. Now she's putting me on to more the Cuban rap artists that's rapping out in Cuba. She's putting me on to artists that I knew nothing about.
That's dope. I remember it's interesting because in my household, my conservative parents in certain ways. My dad early on was like, yo, this hip hop's like my parents never banned anything. My mom was never about censorship. She was always like, listen, I'd rather have, listen and talk about it than ban. But she didn't like it because she would always hear the fuck and all this shit. My dad was like, oh, they're just weed smokers and all this shit. But definitely when I copped that Fugees album, and definitely, like you said, they heard No Woman, No Cry. My dad, obviously, he knew the song. My mom obviously knew the song. I even remember my mom telling me years ago that she had, and this surprised the hell out of me, she had dated a Jamaican man when she was living in the Dominican Republic. And this was in the 70s. Yes. And this was in the 70s. This is in the 70s in the Dominican Republic. And obviously you understand the racial context of the Dominican Republic, with dark-skinned people and all this thing. And in the Dominican Republic, that people who are dark-skinned, they still can say that they're not black. They say that I'm Indian or whatever. But my mom dating a Jamaican man who was unquestionably black was just like fucking taboo and all this shit. Anyway, fast forward, she knew No Woman No Cry. So when she heard that song, it was just kind of like cool. Okay, that if this is what hip hop is, then I think the rest of it's okay. And so if you look at the album cover at that time, Wyclef, he started growing his locks. and I think
Yes.
Lauren had locks as well, and then Praz had cornrows. And I remember I wanted to get locks and I wanted to get cornrows. When I wanted to get cornrows, my mom was like, okay, like she didn't have a problem with it because she had seen it associated with Wyclef and the Fugees and that song, and it just really like changed a lot of shit in terms of like just identity. Like my mom was like, okay, well I associated this with hip hop, and then these guys are hip hop, so then yeah, getting cornrows. And then I remember, I came home with my cornrows and shit, and one of my mom's friends, was talking to her. She's like, oh, but the kids who use cornrows, they're drug dealers and all this shit. And my mom was like, no, that's not true. That's not true. They're not drug dealers. It's a hairstyle. It's a great hairstyle. There's nothing wrong with it. So she ended up defending not just me, but just like this whole hip hop look to her more conservative friends. So, I give credit to Wyclef for that indirectly.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yo, bro, like looking back at it now, just reflecting on it with you, like that album actually inside of my house did a lot.
Facts. I think the Fuji as a whole did thing is the fact, because a lot of people, as much as people giving props to Lauryn Hill because the album went diamond, people really sleep on Wyclef's first album. That first album was just like,
The Carnival.
Yes,
it was incredible.
So slept on.
The only track I did not like on that album was that Bee Gees remix, "Staying Alive."
Really?
I didn't like because he didn't do anything new. John Forte's verse was fucking dope, but it just seemed kind of like cheeky to me. It was like one of those, like, it was a studio track. Like, it was the studio chose that track to get Wyclef on it. Yeah,
on the radio. I get it, but the thing about, like, I love that album because it was so hip hop. And the thing about it is, like, that album dropped in '97, and if you remember the video, they did the whole Staying Alive movie, correct?
Yep.
Then what was dope about that video, like, they had a breakdown, and he brought the original Rocksteady crew in the video, and everybody started b-boying.
I remember that.
During that time, during '97, '98, that's when breakdance started coming up again, and people started breakdancing their videos again. So that video came up. Def Squad, where Rappers Delight, when they did their own version, niggas started breakdancing again. The KRS-One, Step Into the World.
I remember that. I started breakdancing at that point, and let me tell you a story about that song.
I think when that video came out, like, everybody started breakdancing in Arlington.
Yeah, I started breakdancing, and I continued in high school. I met some Koreans. That when I went to high school and I started breakdancing in high school, I met these Koreans that they were breakdancers, and that's when I started to understand the impact of hip hop. Because these kids were fucking from, I think they were from Seoul, like around the capital city. They loved hip hop. Like they had every fucking hip hop album imaginable, but they were breakdancers and all this shit. But going back to that Wyclef Staying Alive track, here's a crazy story. I remember when MTV was gonna launch the video, and so it was like a weekday afternoon. They were like, coming up, it's Wyclef Jean's new video, Staying Alive, be here for it, whatever. And I was like mad fucking excited. I was like, yo, I want to see this. And my mom was like, yo, you got to go to the Colmado and get me some beans.
Oh.
Bro, I was fucking pissed because the Colmado was fucking far away. And then I looked at her. I gave her a look like, nah, I'm not going. And she was like, either you go or you go. And I was like, nah, I'm not going. Bro, my dad came up the stairs. He looked at me. He went into the room. He didn't say nothing. My mom went into the room. She came back. And I was like, I'm not going. Bro, my mom slapped the fucking shit out of me. I cried all the way to the Colmado and back. I was like, fuck. And then I missed the video. I was like, fuck, man. And then back in the day, obviously, we didn't have no YouTube, so you had to fucking wait 3 weeks.
3 weeks and shit.
For the shit. But anyway, man, so the song, I wasn't really vibing on the song, but yeah, that album, Sangfezi, was probably one of my favorite tracks. On that album, I think we've given Wyclef his flowers again, but I think it's always understated. But yeah, man, I remember my mom when she found out that Wyclef was Haitian. I kind of giggled. She was like, "He's Haitian?" I was like, "Yeah, Mom." She's like, I was like, "Yeah, Mom, he's Haitian." She just kind of gave me this look. I was like, "Okay, all right," and we moved on. But that Dominican thing.
Yeah,
That
but
look.
again, it was so many. It was like so many dynamics in the album. Because I mean, he went jiggy, of course, but then he went. You know, what I mean, he had with the bars when he had cannabis on the track. Fuck it. Even when he got on the Spanish shit with Guantanamera. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
I tell my mom, so like, oh, these Fugees they're on it. They're like, they know they shit. It's like my mom, when she saw the Fugees, like, okay, it's not just rapping with these guys because they're on some other shit. It's not just I'm gonna rap. I'm gonna give you culture. I'm gonna
I
go with
remember.
culture.
Oh, so that Guantanamera, bro. So I'm not necessarily a fan of remixes, but I loved what he did with No Woman No Cry. But I loved even more what he did with Guantanamera. He literally like the song is effectively the same, but how he structured the song, and then obviously Celia Cruz's voice was on the fucking track. You had
Yes.
Lauren who was on the fucking track,
Killed the verse.
killed the verse. Like that shit was just fucking phenomenal, man. And then obviously back in the day we didn't have lyrics. You online and shit. I sat and I wrote down all the lyrics because I wanted because that's
Hey,
I
man,
had
we
the
from that
tape.
era,
So
man. We from that era. We from that era. We had to write them.
press rewind, write the press rewind, play it again, press rewind. Man, you're bringing back some good nostalgia. Big man, you on the chat with us? We talking about hip hop, our love with hip hop, and what our parents thought of that. What was your first experience with hip hop, and what did your parents think about hip hop? As you were growing up.
Well, in my situation, it wasn't the first song that I remember listening to, like that I have a distinct memory listening to was Raw by Big Daddy Kane, because that was that era, like 88, 89.
Damn.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
that
Let's
was the
go.
first song. I'm like, and this is also when freestyle was still popping. So there's like this is like an era where you could play in a party, you could still play house, you could play fucking freestyle, you play hip hop, you play like all types of shit, and it doesn't sound out of place, And we've kind of come back to that because you hear it in a lot of the production nowadays. They kind of play with it. So I really started getting into the culture when I was like 9, and my cousin was like almost 15, and he had moved from New York to Miami. So he's bringing all these tapes and all types of shit. I'm listening to the Low End Theory. I'm listening to Black Sheep.
But who was getting this music to you though, or were you
That
just kind
my
of like?
cousin. No, my
Oh,
cousin.
so your
Yeah,
cousin. So
my
your cousin. Okay.
yeah, my cousin was the plug, bro. He was definitely the one that brought
He was
like
connect. He was your
fucking
music connect. Legal drug money.
yo. Like
Legal
I'm
drug
talking
music.
like the other day when me and Mike were mentioning. Mike brought it up first. Um, it was the what's it called, the Double X Posse. Like
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember that. I remember y'all
and,
talking about that. I had no fucking clue what that was, by the way.
like he was like the thing is that they were like a bunch of street dudes that just happened to be pretty good at rapping, and I'm like on some goon shit, and they used to get into it with all types of dudes. I think I remember seeing in the Eagle Trips book of rap list that they were like one of the wildest crews in New York in the early '90s, and everybody was like avoiding them and shit. So
Wait, you got that book, son?
yo, my cousin took that shit. I haven't found it. I got the Big Book of Racism that Elliot Wilson and them did. Like that was the
Yeah.
second book. But
No,
yeah, I
I
had
got
the
that book.
book.
I got the Eagle Trip one. I got the
Yo,
Eagle Trip one.
that book is fucking amazing. But
That's a
anyhow,
damn near Bible.
yo, for real, like some of the shit that's in there is still valid, and that book is from like the early 2000s. So as you can imagine, people still kind of like, oh shit, that's still happening. but
As is
now,
with history, usually.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy, bro.
Mad rappers got beat up, yo. Mad rappers got beat up in those times.
Oh man, like, and back then, there wasn't, because there was no YouTube, there wasn't no smartphones, none of that shit. Like a lot of shit used to go down. A lot of dudes like have had to moderate their behavior because you have so many cameras nowadays. It's like, bro, you got to move smart. You can't be on that dumb shit. But
So
it's
here,
like,
real quick, Big, you bring up a point, and let me ask you a question, bro, because I want to know what continue on the topic. But or we could talk about this later. But I'll ask the question now. Do you think
Mhm.
hip hop culture today is less interesting or more interesting because of the fact that we have so many cameras? Because today, like you said, we're recording everything, but like the other side of that is that people are modifying their behavior. So,
I
are we getting the same type of stories? We don't, if you want to talk about it now, it's cool. If you want to save it for later, but that's just an idea that just popped into my head because of what you said.
well, I can I'll just make it quick with that. I think, to be honest, it's not the behavior per se hasn't. I think the type of behavior is not necessarily different. Obviously, the actions are different because every person carries themselves in a different way. But I think a lot of the same actions or the same things that people were doing, just being creative or, just kind of like now you got a lot of clout chasing, but I'm like, this is not the first time this shit has happened. When rappers started realizing like, yo, I can make a video out of this shit. I think a lot of thought went into it back in like the 80s or whatnot. But as far as what you wanted to project, Rakim had the paid in full crew. Like they dudes, they ran a whole entire neighborhood in Brooklyn. Fucking who else I'm trying to think of? Like, a lot of these dudes
I mean, the Supreme Team in Queens. And
yeah,
fucking,
Yeah, Supreme
like
Team.
who Supreme Team put a they were like the street dudes for they would cruise all over the city. So, and when you go out west, the same kind of thing. You kind of like NWA, they do straight out of Compton, bro. Like how fucking crazy that video is. Like if you think about for the era, like nobody was the shit was explosive, right? So as far as the behavior, what you see now, I think it's just a variation of that sort of thing where people bringing attention to something. But I think there was a much more the reasons for people doing things back in the day, like there was always a purpose to stuff. And you can kind of tell when I remember seeing when the NWA movie came out, Ice Cube and his son, O'Shea Jr., they doing basically like a press tour, and they were like, okay, how this dude Graham Norton from BBC was asking him, so like, how did you help your son prep for this role? And he's saying like, well, like, we carried ourselves a certain way because we were kind of like, some of the first dudes to do this from where we're from. So, you gotta carry your head high, you stick your chest out, you walk like, like you run the shit. And it's like, bro, they're like 18, 19 doing this shit. So it's like there was a purpose to the behaviors, the antics or whatever, But you also had some funny dudes doing some silly shit. Yeah, Biz Markie and rest in peace, the two of the three of the Fat Boys, like the Fat Boys was doing things. So there was like, even in comedy, there was like a purpose, So, but that's my thoughts on it.
And I think also to piggyback that, I think also people back in the days, like they had more integrity and they were very big or like not snitching on themselves. You know what I mean? And they always say like they were happy they not from the era that they didn't have YouTube back then. So now you think,
yeah, but I don't think there's any consequence. But that's just how society's changed. I don't think there's any consequences now to you kind of outing yourself on some silly shit that you're doing. You know what I'm saying? I think that might be a positive thing as well. Like when you do something and then you talk about what you did and how you fucked up or whatever. I think we're kind of valuing that a little bit more. So that society having changed that way, I think that there's a value in that. Like,
well, and now that you mention it, there's
I know what you're thinking. Where can I find more? For full episodes of the Ruckus Podcast, you can check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and your other digital streaming services. The Ruckus, it's organized chaos. Don't worry, we're working on getting Mike a better mic. Get it, Mike? And don't worry about it. You'll get it eventually.